would not be mad about that either. But we don't want to keep it too long on the Oscars talk, because there is a movie that is about to drop, and if you haven't already, that has recently dropped for some fans, and that is Zack Snyder's Justice League. And before we get started, we're going to bring our boy RB3 on to join us to discuss and do a little recap/review. We're just going to jump right into it. So, Brittany, I'll pass it to you first. Like, you sat and you saw the whole 4-hour movie. What was your initial reactions, and what were your general thoughts after finishing it?
I actually really liked it. I tried to go into it obviously with no expectations. I also tried to, scrub the theatrical cut from my mind, which is something that, obviously I've rewatched it. It just gets worse after you rewatch it. But I really like this version. I know people probably won't like the length of it. But length aside, I thought it was really great. It's very character driven. Again, no spoilers, but a lot of things like dialogue between characters were cut out from the theatrical cut, which, they serve the purpose. Like, it makes all the heroes coming together much more impactful, much greater. So I really liked it. I mean, no complaints from me. I mean, I would probably give it an 8.5 out of 10 if I were giving it a score. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Definitely, and I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed it, finishing it up and sitting there after the 4 hours. So RB3, we actually saw this together. So I'll pass it to you first. What were your initial reactions to the whole movie and just sitting there and for the full 4 entire hours?
Yeah, I mean, I was genuinely surprised by this movie. I really enjoyed it. And now this is coming from someone who's a little biased, because I definitely have been advocating for the Snyder Cut since the theatrical cut came out in 2017. Even before that, even when we started hearing stories of them firing Joss Whedon and firing Zack Snyder and hiring Joss Whedon to do the reshoots, and then they're using the daughter's, suicide to cover it up, and all these like really like terrible things. And you find out that they pushed the theatrical cut, to be released in November 2017, all because it was like some stock bonuses, and it's like they didn't even really care about the fans. But now this is finally the opportunity where fans are getting to speak up and have their voices heard, like what happened with Sonic a little bit last year, but even on a bigger level, because we're seeing a full-fledged 4-hour cut of this movie that I didn't think we're ever going to see. And now I think when people were talking about, does the Snyder Cut exist? Does it not exist? I think they weren't really tuning into like the process of the filmmaking of filmmaking in general. And when I say that, it's because usually when there's like a 4-hour cut of a movie, that's usually like the very first draft. That's usually like the assembly cut that you show to the studio and the executives so they could like trim it down and give notes. But somewhere, I guess, in that process, they literally just decided to just make it 2 hours instead of compromising a little bit. I think if this would have been like a 3-hour, 20-minute, 3-hour, 30-minute film, people, for one, would have sat down and watched it, and people would have sat down and loved it. Like, I personally think if there was like a 3-hour, 20-minute version of this movie that was like really well done, like really sharpened and perfected, this would have had like an 80, 85, 90% of Rotten Tomatoes, because the team up was just that good. The team up was awesome. And the first Avengers movie with Joss Whedon directed, that's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the Marvel Universe. I love the MCU. But they had 9 movies to set that up before, or 5 movies to set that up before even getting to the Avengers. This had no movies to set this up, and they did everything and established everything really well. So I love this version of Justice League.
Yeah, and this is something that we spoke about off camera, is just like how Batman versus Superman, the Ultimate Edition, just added so much more nuance and fully fleshed out the movie as a whole. Even with the extra 35-40 minutes that was added on, it just made the movie, in my mind, just feel a lot better. Like I even said, when in my initial review, I felt like I was a bit whelmed with the Batman versus Superman, but when I went back and saw the Ultimate Edition, I was like, well, people owe Zack Snyder an apology, because if this was his ultimate movie, like, then if this is what he wanted people to see in the theaters, and this is what they should have seen. And in my mind, it's so like, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this before seeing the new one, I wholeheartedly recommend watching Man of Steel, rewatching Batman vs Superman, the Ultimate Edition, and then going right from that into this 4-hour cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Like, it'll be like a whole Snyder day. It'll take your whole day, but I think it'll be much more worth it in terms of like having a satisfying conclusion to what Zack envisioned. And I think with the whole storytelling aspect of it as a whole, like you said, although it was 4 hours plus movie, like I could have done, like you said, with a tighter 3 hour movie, but I did appreciate how they did include like part one, part two, like part three. So if you did want to pause and take breaks in between, you could. So for me personally, just overall, Brittany, you said that this was a definitely more character driven movie, and the epitome of that is Ray Fisher's character Cyborg, because in the original 2017 version, all of his parts were cut, all the deleted scenes, everything was cut, and we just had him. We knew like he was we knew that he was rebuilt using the mother box, but that's pretty much all we had to go off of. We didn't see any of the relationship with him and Silas Stone, his father, or anything like that, even the mother flashback that we saw in this movie. So Brittany, I'll pass it to you first. What did you think of the characters that they got to shine more, and more specifically, how did you feel about Cyborg being the more of the catalyst of the movie to kind of further the plot a long way?
I really enjoyed Ray Fisher's Cyborg. Um, it's one of those things where, knowing everything that happened, like on and off set, you're really rooting for him. And I feel like this movie, specifically for him and for Cyborg, is this kind of, I don't know, like a redemption. Like the Cyborg that he first was working on,
Mm-hmm.
everyone now finally gets to see. So as he was intended, we got to see it. And honestly, for me, he was the best in the cast, just in general. Like, he has emotional moments. You really see the ups and downs of the character. You understand him more. He's not just, inserted into the movie like they just made it seem like in the theatrical cut. So there's just more weight there. You actually see more interactions with him and his father. We see Karen Bryson playing Dr. Eleanor Stone, like for the first time, because she too was cut out of the other version of this movie. So
Yeah.
honestly, that was like my favorite part, like Cyborg and seeing more intrinsic character moments and learning more about their backstories and histories, which you didn't get in the theatrical cut, was really what made the movie for me.
Yeah, and specifically with Cyborg's character, I'm just so blown away that Whedon or whoever made the decision, like they not only did they cut out a lot of his story, but they just completely wiped all like the whole family aspect of it. And at the heart, like that was Zach's whole intention, was like he wanted to make sure Cyborg was the heart of the movie. And although like the 2017 version as well, and I thought it would have been more, I think this movie definitely would have set up more of the Flash Cyborg type of relationship. Whereas, I don't want to spoil details or go into details about this movie in particular, but yet, like we said, Ray and or Cyborg and his father have a lot more screen time together in this one, and you get to see that relationship and that chemistry. Although, like it's a rocky right now, or it's rocky in the movie. And then on the mirror side of things, you have Flash and his father. Like he's trying to become a forensic lab scientist. So those two father relationships, I would have loved to see that carry over into the Flash movie, because Cyborg was originally supposed to be in it. So now I'm just like, at first, and I think I asked you this, RB3, when we finished the movie, is like, now do you want to see more of Snyder's universe? And now that we've seen what he had fully planned for Justice League, do you want to see more of this universe and more of these characters the way that Zack envisioned them?
I would love to, honestly. By the end of this movie, by the time like you actually see that full team up and they beat Steppenwolf, like I'm all in. I'm like, yo, give me more of this. Like this is what we needed, because this is the golden age of heroes that they were, alluding to in the beginning of this film. And I definitely think, I would love to see a continuation of this. This was the best Ben Affleck has been in one of these movies, I feel like. And I said this on our first cut review, but when you're looking at Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and the Snyder cut of the Justice League, to me, the Snyder cut is by far the best of that trilogy, and
Mm-hmm.
it is it would, if it was a part of the DCEU or the DC Extended or whatever it is, it would be the best for me personally. It would be my favorite of that series. So again, I would love to see it continue. I don't know if it's going to continue. It looks like it might continue because Warner Brothers gave Zack and crew a bunch of money to to film a couple of additional scenes that at least appear to be some sort of setup. And now that we're literally living in the world of multiverse between Spider-Man, MCU, and all these other properties, I don't see them not at least wanting to explore continuing this a little bit further on down the line.
Yeah, and I would love to, like you said, now that they've established that there's different worlds and all of that, and we have the Joker and whatever world that's set in the old times, and we have the Batman, which we don't know when that'll be taking place and what specific world that will be taking place. But if they want to just keep going on HBO Max and have this be its own separate thing, Brittany, we actually talked when we were talking about the trailer itself. We touched on this as like if we could have it all be in its own world, that would be completely fine. But I did want to ask you, so just speaking of like just continuing the Snyder Cut world, what did you think of the addition of like Darkseid, and you mentioned it as well, like Granny Goodness and all that? What did you think of seeing those characters actually interact, maybe even fight or scuffle a little bit with the Justice League?
That is essentially what I am waiting for. I'm like, yo, Granny Goodness, the Furies versus Wonder Woman. I think I mentioned this when we talked about like seeing the trailer, and Granny Goodness, pops up like, in the background. The DC animated stuff is so good. Superman, Batman, Apocalypse, the scene with Wonder Woman and Big Barda fighting against the Furies, like I need that in live action. Like it would, fill my spirit with joy. So I would be very interested in seeing more of his universe or more that he has planned. Like even if it just has to be something that's, strictly HBO Max, let's say. But I personally, as Monique said, would like to see it. So I'm all for it. I was excited that, we do get to see Darkseid. I know people, like, I've seen people on Twitter being like, oh, well, you can't just insert the big bad, like, in the first movie. And I'm like, okay, but he doesn't have, as far as we know, the same kind of thing. Like not everything needs to be in comparison to the MCU, like different type of struggle here. Like you didn't have someone, any of the directors in the MCU, let's say, who are, basically randomly fired from their film, also were dealing with, a family tragedy on top of all of this. So you can't really say these kinds of things. I was happy that we got to see Darkseid. I mean, in the film, obviously, Steppenwolf is still the, like, main big bad, I guess you would say. So yeah, I would like to see more of his vision, to be honest, because as I said, I actually liked BVS, the Ultimate Edition. I liked Man of Steel for the most part. And I really enjoyed the Justice League now. So yeah.
And I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but I did want to point out, like with this one particular, like it was clear, and to me, it felt clear that this could have easily, like in the original, like if they had everything play out the way they wanted to play out, this could have been a two-parter movie in the theaters, like release one at the beginning of the year, release one at the end of the year, or something like that. This definitely could have been two whole separate movies, in my opinion, especially what the last, I keep not wanting to spoil anything, but especially what the last act tease, especially the last 30 minutes or so. This could have been a whole separate movie. So definitely would have loved to see more of this. But something that I was pleasantly surprised about, and I'm not complaining, was a little bit about how much more like intense and graphic it was when it came to the fight scenes. Like when we see Steppenwolf fight the Amazons and the Atlanteans when he goes to get those mother boxes. This time it felt a lot more brutal. It felt like the axe was really cutting through some stuff. So RB3, I'll pass it to you because this is something you mentioned you actually reacted to while you're watching, but just the brutalityness of the gruesomeness of this. It wasn't too over the top, but I felt like it definitely made it a lot more mature than like action scenes we've seen compared to other movies. And like it, for example, I don't want to compare it to the MCU, but I haven't seen like people getting cut in half and being bloody and stuff like that in the MCU for the most part. So what do you think about the action in this?
Yeah, I thought the action, for one, the action itself, the way that they handled the action, this is what the benefit of having like a longer cut really gets into, because they really do a good job of like highlighting, setting up the action beats so that when they do eventually pay off, it ends up being so much more rewarding. The time I could think about that best was, we saw the Wonder Woman saving like the children in the beginning, opening sequence. We saw that in the theatrical cut, but you almost feel like you didn't see it because of how different it is in this version. For one, the music's so much different. The suspense is so much different. When you're just watching the theatrical cut, it just looks like a regular old fight scene. But then and watching the Snyder cut, there's actually like intention. Like there's actually like an actual stake that's being set up here, like a time dynamic, like all these things being set up. Same thing happens later on in the movie with a bunch of other scenes. So even though the action scenes are similar, they are longer, so the suspense ends up building a lot more and the payoff is a lot more satisfying. But then the trade-off with that is that they also did add a good amount of CGI blood. You could tell, like, they're figuring, we're putting this on HBO Max, it's not PG-13, whatever. They just added a bunch of CGI blood, which is totally cool. Hey, I'm here for it. But that is notable. That is notable too. They definitely went. They upped the violence. I know people are like, I'm not complaining about that. That's not like necessarily complaint. It's definitely just like an observation because obviously comic books are pretty graphic and bloody too. But yeah, they definitely took that to an extra level with this one.
And it's interesting. I think that was one of the things I said, like when I was just watching it first, especially with Wonder Woman in particular. I was like, damn, these fight scenes look incredible. What was your reaction to, how did you feel about the new character themes? Like for Wonder Woman, more specifically, like the mascara scream that like stayed with her throughout the movie. Like I didn't need it for some of it, but I don't know. How did you feel about that?
I actually liked it. To your point, like I don't think we necessarily needed it basically almost like every time she popped up, but at some point you don't really like you notice it, but it's not as I guess aggressive as it is when, it first pops up. So I didn't mind like the kind of new theme. Um Though, just piggybacking off what you said a bit earlier in terms of Wonder Woman, so it's kind of two different versions. Like, I tweeted about this literally yesterday because you know how fan Twitter can be. Like, Wonder Woman being compassionate and her being a warrior are essentially two sides of the same coin. She has been both since she's existed. So it's one of those things where I know people, I don't like feel some type of way about Wonder Woman 1984, but I'm like, this is just one specific story in this character who is around 5,000 years old, like, her story. And in that one, she is like losing her powers. So that's a lot different than her being in, like, I assume, for example, for in the Snyder cut, she's in current day. So let's say it's 2021. Wonder Woman. But yeah, that is just one thing I need to get off my chest because, people be on the Twitter annoying about that. But yeah, I liked the theme songs. I liked some of the new themes that we got for the different characters. It's a lot more metal. Like it was giving me, like, if I were to just say compare it to like a comic book, it reminds me of the recent stuff by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Like they have their arc that was like Dark Knight's death metal. Like I feel like Junkie XL, if they were ever to adapt that into live action, should definitely do the score for that. But yeah, it was very metal and I liked it.
And so the last thing I wanted to ask you guys about is just because thankfully I when I watched it, like I put it on a projector, watched it on the screen, so it wasn't as noticeable. But when I tried to do it at first, when I was watching some of it on my laptop, like the aspect ratio of it did take me out a little bit of it. But thankfully, when I put it on the projector screen and watched it like that, I felt like, okay, I can see why they wanted to film it in IMAX. But for people that don't have access to like maybe like to see it on a big screen or something like that, Brittany and RB3, I want you both to answer. How did you feel about the overall like aspect ratio of it and it being in like in that square type of format? Because I'm not gonna lie, when I did watch it on my laptop for the first time, just trying to like see what this movie was about, like I was like, I don't know if I'm feeling it like on this type of screen. So Aubrey, I'll pass to you first. Aspect ratio, how because this is something you pointed out when you were talking about the trailer. So how did that play out for you in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, I'm still kind of puzzled by the decision to do the aspect ratio that way. Zack Snyder's talked about in interviews like, the superheroes are tall and he wants to frame them taller and bigger. But I mean, I still think that could have been communicated effectively without like totally, demonstratizing, the aspect ratio, the format of cinema. Like I think for me, like it's a little confusing because uh you learn throughout, film school or whatever, like the old movies used to be in this kind of format, right? The 4:3, that's the Academy format, because it's literally the Academy format, because that's what old movies from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Art and Sciences, that's like their format. So now that IMAX is like prevalent, people have been shooting things on IMAX and adding bigger frames to it. But honestly, to me, like, I don't know. I mean, I felt like some of the extra framing was just kind of getting in the way. Like, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think, like you said, if you have a projector, if you have like a massive TV, and it so happens to be like 4:3, maybe this might be a dope experience for you. Or if you're watching on IMAX, it would be amazing. But to me personally, like, we're streaming this at home. Like, it's coming on HBO Max. It's coming to streaming. Like, it looks like an Instagram video, feels like an Instagram video a little bit. And it definitely am like, it doesn't take away from the quality or the content of the movie necessarily. But I do think it was, this movie makes a lot of choices, and a lot of choices I like. Some choices I don't like. I don't like some of the music choices like they make, like in terms of like how they play like certain songs that like really don't fit the tone of the scene at all. There are choices that I don't like. This is just one of those choices that I'm like, why? Like, what's the motivation behind it other than making it look cool, make it look different, and like it's for IMAX? But I don't know. I just think, when you cinema was literally made for the widescreen to differentiate itself from like old TV. Now we had WandaVision like kind of literally parody the 4:3 thing, and now we're seeing an actual movie released that way. So I don't know. It's not a big deal, but it's definitely a deal for me.
And before I pass it to you, Brittany, another thing I do want to touch on. This is not really a spoiler, but just speaking of the music itself, this is another like little criticism I had about it. Just when we do get to see Ezra and Kirsty meet as Flash or as Barry and Iris for the first time, when he, like, there's been deleted scenes online that you've seen and all that, but when he does actually save her and we get that moment of them meeting, that was like one of the music choices. I was like, this just feels like it's making me want to laugh at the same time as like, no, this is supposed to be like a sincere moment between them. So Brittany, I'll pass to you. Like, before I talk about the aspect ratio, how did you feel about the Barry and Iris meeting scene?
I liked it. I'm glad that it was in the movie because, again, it was something that was cut. Again, it just gives more, backstory to the character. And, because there is the scene, obviously, that was in the theatrical cut where he's talking with his dad, and his dad basically talks about all these like dead end jobs and whatever, but there's no context to it. Here, we obviously actually see him like applying for a job and things like that. So I actually liked it. I have seen a fair few people on the Twitter that do not care for it. But to each their own. I feel like people are putting bad things onto it that are definitely not the case. But again, film is subjective, so I will see certain scenes one way and other people will see it another. But I liked the scene, personally speaking.
And lastly, Brittany, how did you feel about because I know when we talked, you said you were watching it on TV and you tried to stretch it out a little bit. So how did that work out for you?
So it was easier on one of my TVs than the other because you could just kind of do the scan thing and it just kind of does it automatically. The other TV, the newer one, kind of does it more by percentage. So to make sure things don't look too stretched or whatever is more of a process. But yeah, like I didn't mind. It was better even just aspect ratio wise, like watching it on a TV versus like, on the computer for sure. Um, but yeah, like it's just kind of like a small nitpick essentially. I would have also liked to have, actually seen it in IMAX and on an IMAX screen. But
Mm-hmm.
again, we're stuck in this Pan Dolce still. So
But that being said, I think we can wrap it up here. I'm sure, like, hopefully next week or so, when people actually have seen it, we'll do more spoiler talk, because there are some things in this movie that left me speechless, and I'm sure that the same rings both for you guys. So we'll definitely recircle up, talk about the spoilers and all that. We don't want to ruin any surprises for anybody. But man, there are some surprises. So all in all, you gave your kind of score at the beginning, Brittany, but I'll pass to you first, RB3. What would you give this out of 10 if you had to give it a score?
If I had to give this a score out of 10, I'd probably give this a strong 8. I definitely liked it a lot. This is a great Justice League movie, better than any other DC movie, for me that we've gotten. And even though there are some problems, like I do think maybe in the beginning, like the scene where Aquaman and Batman like meet up for the first time. I know that was a scene that was originally filmed by Zack Snyder, then was actually completely refilmed by Joss Whedon. With that one, I could see it because the acting was a little stale in this cut. And I could just see like those little tiny things that are like, oh, this could have been fixed a little bit. This could have been fixed a little bit. This could have been fixed a little bit. But like at the same time, I don't even know if I could really criticize that, because this isn't a conventional movie. This is an extended 4-hour director's vision. So I don't even know if I can still criticize it the same way. But so that's why I'm kind of landing on like a strong 8. Not perfect, close to perfect. But just a little bit away, and it's still a little bit in that rough draft phase.
Absolutely, man. And lastly, Brittany, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I mean, go watch the movie is my last thought. I know there's people that, don't like Zack Snyder's movies in general, or say they don't like how this movie came about, because you will have those people that think like, oh, the fans kind of bullied like, studios or, people to like release the movie. And I'm like, well, maybe if the studio didn't tamper with the theatrical version, then there wouldn't have been this problem to begin with. But I would urge everyone, to actually see the movie, come to your own conclusions, because I think that a lot of people, I think even the reviews kind of show that a lot of people have been pleasantly surprised. So
Well said. And the last thing I'm gonna just say is, like, now I know that some people feel some type of way about Snyder Cut fans, because like any fandom, there's going to be that toxic minority that just will just attack you for no reason. So I'm just hoping that the Snyder Cut fans are absolutely, like, the majority of them are chill about it. They seem like they've been chill. They've been happy to see the film finally see the day of light. I just hope that toxic, small, minute group of people that are like, see, I told you so, like, see, like, blah blah blah, this is why we need him to take over and all that, do not just start running rampant again, because I don't want to call out, I don't want to like group all Snyder Cut fans as bad people, because some of our friends are Snyder Cut people, some like people we know like are Snyder Cut fans. They just want to see the movie, but they don't go about harassing anybody. They just say, like, if it happens, it happens, and it has happened. So all in all, I hope the Snyder Cut fans keep that same respect and dignity that they've been trying to hold themselves accountable to. And with that being said, though, like I like you said, Bernie, at the beginning, I'll probably give it like an 8.5. It definitely does have some flaws in it, but it's it's a huge upgrade from the one that we got in 2017. So with that being said, RB3, where can they find you at, man?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3. You can follow the First Cut YouTube channel at First Cut on YouTube, and at First Cut TMO on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and TikTok.
Absolutely. And Brittany, where can they find you at on the socials?
I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram. My handles for both are Brittany _Murphs, BRITANY _MURPHS. And I'd also like to shout out those of the Snyder Cut fandom who were also raising money for the suicide prevention, which obviously was for Zach's daughter Autumn. So I feel like that should get a shout out too. So
Absolutely. Those are the best type of Snyder Cut fans, and we want to keep that positivity and love going. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this review. And we'll be back here to talk spoilers, because like I said, there are some major spoilers in this movie, but we don't want to ruin that for you. We want you to see the surprises for yourself. So make sure to follow us on Twitter at Geeks of Color, wherever you're listening to this to. Make sure to subscribe. And thank you guys so much for listening. Peace up, A-Town down. We'll see you soon here for another podcast.